Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to ed up on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Elvin Freitas, co-founder of the EdUp Experience podcast. And today I am super excited because we are starting a new series called EdUp Extra. And why? Why? Because who doesn't like a little extra? So we're going to go right into it. As you know, I like to just jump right in. Our guests today are Jonathan Sparling, and he's the vice president of strategic partnerships at College Well. Jonathan, how are you doing today?
Doing great, Elvin. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy to have you. Thanks for being here. And our other guest, she is Karen Christoph, and she is Dean of Admission at Colorado College. Karen.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm great, Elvin. How are you today?
I'm
really
doing
happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here. I'm doing great. So, as you both know, today we are talking about the value of private colleges, right? And so, the first question is, before we get into the specifics of everything, I like to ask everyone to kind of level set. So, Jonathan, let's start with you. Level set. Tell us about what you do and how do you do it. EdUp Experience has brought you powerful conversations with more than 400 college presidents and higher ed leaders, over 1,000 episodes and counting. Now, we're inviting you to join us in shaping the future of higher ed podcasting. For just $5.99 a month, you lock in that rate for life, but only if you sign up before December 31st, 2025. As a supporter, you'll get ad-free early access to episodes. Prices go up after December 31st, but your rate never will. Visit edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com. Click support the show and join our community today.
Excellent. Well, Elvin, again, excited to be here representing College Well and Private College 529 plan. So yeah, at College Well, really my role is to help families through the college planning and saving process, right? And so our organization really supports them by bringing in experts from colleges that we work with, as well as financial advisors, and providing some really good educational content, a lot of what you're talking about as well, just in terms of the process, and really kind of bringing the voice of the experts to the families. And so that's what we do at College Well, and kind of support that. Specifically, I also work very closely with our member colleges. And so these are folks that are part of the Private College 529 plan, which we'll talk about later, so I won't get into it right now. Kind of working with them and helping them, making sure that they're promoting to their families and providing the best value. And, I've been with College Well almost 5 years. My background, I've worked in other organizations, helping families plan, save, and pay for college. And I actually started my career working on a college campus in the financial aid office. And so excited to I think of it as a full circle journey in providing support to folks.
Oh, dude, that's awesome that you worked in financial aid.
Yeah.
You know that
Yeah.
you know how it works. I work with financial aid very closely when I was in hiring. So that's awesome. Well, thanks for the contact. And now let's go over to Karen. Karen, tell us all about you. What do you do? How do you do it?
Yeah, thanks, Elvin. So happy to be here. So I'm the Dean of Admission at Colorado College. This is my 5th private liberal arts college. So I love working at places that are really mission-driven, that really help students not only to have a fantastic education during their 4 years on campus, but afterward, strong alumni networks. And so I believe really strongly in this. I'm the product of a 4-year liberal arts college, and I love my work in helping students and families through the college admission process, right? Not just at Colorado College, but also in trying to demystify what can be a very opaque, very mysterious, and kind of unnecessarily anxiety-provoking process. So I love to be able to work with students and families. This is I don't know if I want to say it, year 36 for me in this work. So clearly this is a profession that I love and I'm going to continue doing until I can no longer pack my suitcase and talk to students all over the country and the world.
That's amazing, Karen. 36 years. Wow. So let's see. You probably started when you were about 10 years old. That's amazing. You're old. I love it.
9 or 10.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for that, Karen. So, all right, Jonathan and Karen. So we are here again to talk about the value of private colleges and why high schoolers should include them on their college application list. So let's talk about this. So in a nutshell, why should students keep private colleges on their radar? So let's start with you, Jonathan.
So, I think one of the biggest things that students should be thinking about and why they should keep it on their radar is that private colleges have a unique ability to provide students with an educational opportunity and educational experiences across the gamut. And so, for those families that are looking for them, for students, there's a wide variety of private colleges that really offer something for everyone. There are beyond, the kind of checklist in terms of like smaller class sizes, support services. There's some of those often other things outside of or after college that really are afforded through folks that attend private college strong alumni networks that really help provide that support even beyond the experience. And, when I talk to families and kind of when we talk to families about the private college difference and the private college experience, it really is personally that high touch, high experience and a variety of experiences that families can really get from a private college experience. And so I'm the product of a private college experience myself. I went to Assumption University now. It used to be Assumption College, but Assumption University in Worcester, Mass. And I can tell you that the experience that I got, both from the academics the academic offerings and what I learned as a student, as well as those connections I made, I still tap our alumni network, still have contacts with folks, obviously the friendships I made, beyond that. So I do really think that private colleges have that unique space and that unique offering to offer to students. So absolutely should be keeping on their college search.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the fact that you said Worcester, not
That's right.
Worcester. We talked about it before. Worcester.
That's right.
Karen, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Jonathan's hit a lot of the really important points, right? I think of both small and larger private institutions as being very much focused on students and focused on the undergraduate experience. And so I think for many students that transition to college can be really daunting. And so having those support resources, advisors, smaller classes, really very student facing institutions that really ask themselves, what can we do differently and better for our students? And so I think there is that sense of places that really will care about an individual student. I mean, one of the great things when I've traveled outside the US is that we have so many choices for colleges and universities, thousands of them, right? But I think this particular space, there's lots of places that admit very few students, lots of places that admit most of the students. So it's a really lovely range of institutions in terms of size, selectivity, experience. Some are urban, some are rural, some are suburban, right? It just gives you so much latitude. And I guess my bias is having worked at all of these places for more than 3 decades, is that these are students that get like the premium experience, right? They really get access to resources and opportunities that, as Jonathan said, like happen when they're on campus, but also happen after they leave. Those sort of networks make a huge difference, right, in finding jobs and going out into, a somewhat uncertain world. So when I think about the many ways also that private colleges make it affordable for parents, right? So for many of us, meeting full demonstrated financial need, offering merit-based awards, really making that education affordable for parents while making the case that it is worth every single penny that we charge.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And something interesting is that I think when people hear private college, they have this type of stereotype, maybe, or some type of uh, image in their mind about how 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 much it costs and all that good stuff, and all the negative things about private colleges. So I would love to know, what would you like to myth bust about private colleges? So let's start with you, Karen.
Yeah, I think there is this elitist idea, right? That they're elitist, that they don't admit very many students. They're looking for ways to not offer you admission. And again, that gamut of selectivity. And I also think it's that we're sort of overpriced rather than saying what we focus on is experiences that can be more costly, right? If you put 500 students in a lecture hall, it is so much cheaper than putting 25 students in a classroom and having a professor that can give close personal advising, right? Can be available not just during office hours, but I was just at a session with some students yesterday, and they were talking about how their professor invites them to lunch and dinner. And this is not just a Colorado College thing, right? This is a really seeing the whole individual and wanting to make sure that they get sort of the wraparound support. And, our hope is that families see college as an investment, right? That it is like anything that is something that you take time to invest in, that, using college savings plans and other tools, that a family sees the value in providing this experience for their student. I mean, when you think about it, like, what more could you give in terms of generosity as a parent than to make your student's experience in college really be so transformative that it sets the tone for the rest of their lives?
Absolutely. Jonathan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think when it comes to that myth, the biggest one and the one that we we try to bust all the time, and Karen mentioned it, is the cost, and you mentioned it, Alvin, right? I mean, certainly, if you were to just look at the sticker price of private colleges, higher maybe than your publics and certainly your communities, but that's not really factoring in that net price, right? Because private colleges have a lot of resources, financial aid resources to help reduce that down to that sticker price, or excuse me, down to that net price. A lot of families end up paying a lot less than that. And so that's that biggest myth that we need to bust, is that at the end of the day, it's going to be more expensive because private colleges do have those financial resources. And really that was the reason that our plan was started, right? So Private College 529 is a prepaid 529 plan with close to 300 private colleges, and it's allowing families to prepay on the cost of college. And so not only are these private colleges discounting at the point of students going, but the ones in our plan are committing ahead of time and saying, look, if you want to come here in the future and if you want to be part of this, we're going to make this commitment to affordability. And so there's a lot of levers that private colleges can pull, but that's the biggest myth, because what gets all the attention is that big sticker price, the 90,000, the 95, as you mentioned, Elvin. But folks, once you kind of dig in and you look at the data, you realize that a lot of families, most families, end up paying a lot less when attending a private college.
Yeah, it's a shame that the narrative is just that big sticker price where the
Yeah,
meat is just hidden so well, and they do
I
such a
know.
great job of hiding that, which
Yeah.
just boggles my mind. But a really
Mhm.
good points. So I want to move into a fit. So how do you know if a private college is a good fit for the student or the family? So let's start with you, Jonathan.
So I think for students and families, fit is certainly something that is, I think, developed over time, right? So, for families kind of going through that process of the college search, and there's going to be a lot that they're going to uncover. Obviously, they know their students very well by the time it's junior or senior year of high school. My oldest is 9 right now, and I'm already thinking, like, I think he could be a good fit here, right? And he's only 9, and so that might change, right? But so, I think there's a couple ways that you kind of know how the college is a good fit. Certainly, spending time to look at what are the academic offerings of the college, right? And what are some of those intangibles in terms of, like, the location and the size of the private college. Also kind of talking to folks who have either gone there and or talking and having conversations with students at that private college, just to get a good feel, right? Your students, parents know their students well, students know themselves or are starting to know themselves. And so, spending time on campus, I think, is actually one of the best ways to know, if possible, if that is a good fit. But, I guess Karen does this all the time. And so, I know that she'll have a really good perspective on this, but I think that ability to spend some time on campus would be one of the biggest ones.
Yeah, what do you think, Aaron?
Yeah, I think Jonathan's going to be a great college parent.
Yeah.
I don't hear those helicopter blades going so fast. He acknowledges that maybe his young one might know something about them. So I can't wait until Jonathan's kids apply to college. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a lot of what I would say. The other thing is, I think research is really important and
Mm,
fit kind of happens, which is to say, having an opportunity to get to know a place. I mean, one of the things that I find so interesting in how students search right now is that social media has a huge influence, right? There, like we have 5 or 6 Instagrams on our campus, right? Right, including the admission Instagram, and the college Instagram, and lots of clubs and organizations have Instagram. So, like, check out the IG feed. Go watch a TikTok video, right? Like much of this is unfiltered content. So it gives you the real story, right? It's not just what is it that those nice people in the admission office are saying and the nice slick brochures, but really getting a feel for a place. And I think Jonathan's right about visiting. You know, not every student who applies to Colorado College, for instance, can visit if they live
mhm,
outside of the Rocky Mountains, right? And so one of the things we say is, like in Boston's a perfect example, or New York's a perfect example, where go to a big place, go to a more urban place, go to a
mhm,
smaller place, go to a suburban place. Give yourself a sense for what that would look like. I still remember helping my niece and nephews with this process, and one of them said, I want to go to the University of Hawaii. And his mother turned to him, my sister in law, and said, Yep, and you won't be coming home at Thanksgiving. And you could just see his face like, oh, wait a minute, beaches or coming home for Thanksgiving, right? I mean, I do think we see 17 and 18-year-olds as emerging adults, but we also know the emerging part is very much there. And so trying to guide and help. And I think keeping an open mind in this process is really important. The other thing that I feel strongly about is that parents and students should talk about money, right?
mm,
Often there are families that any college could be an option financially. Sometimes there's families that have real restrictions on that. Hopefully, they're parents that have saved, and so can really speak with some honesty around what expectations are financially. But that kind of communication, I think, is really important too. But there's a lot out there, probably information overload rather than a lack of information about colleges and universities.
Yeah, I love that. I can see the image of that child, boy or girl? What was it? It was
Boy, yeah,
oh yeah.
this is my nephew David, who was living in Connecticut at the time. So his parents were like, "Yeah, you'll come home once a year, maybe."
That's great. Oh, I love that visual. I can totally see that. Okay, so I understand. I think Jonathan, you mentioned it before. You
yeah,
did attend a private college, and I
I
believe
did.
Karen, you also attended a private college as well. So I'd love to start with you, Karen, and ask you both, what did you feel you gained from attending a private college? So let's start with you, Karen.
Yeah. So I think that what I got was a really strong academic experience, but I got as much mentoring as I got kind of intellectual stimulation, right? I think of my professors as people that really saw me in a very holistic way, right? That they wanted me to succeed in the classroom. They wanted to help with letters of recommendation. And that's the other thing I always say at private institutions is, right, you know, professors get to know students. And so
Mm,
whether you're applying to law school or med school or for a job, that there's a way in which those letters of recommendation will be really robust, and will reflect kind of personal contact with a student. They will not read like, you know, certainly there are good and bad letters of recommendation all around, but that way that you know the individual and the way that you experience that individual. And I also thought of it as I probably, maybe this is why my career has been about college admission. I chose my college, which turned out to be an amazing experience because I liked my tour guide. And she was a junior at the time, and I was a high school junior. So she was 4 years ahead of me, and I just wanted to be like her when I grew up. But what is interesting about this is we're still friends. And so, like, when I think about that connection of we literally met when I was a prospective student visiting the college, and then we got to know each other once I enrolled. But I think of that connection. I think of those things that help me professionally and help me personally. And also this sense of like being in a classroom where my opinion was heard and respected. And people sometimes told me I was wrong. Often students go to college and for the first time, they get what they would consider a failure. I got a C plus in intermediate macroeconomics. And that told me that I was not going to be an economics major. So, right, the things that you learn are often things where you want to fail well and be in an environment that will help you figure out that was not me. And so I did some pivoting, and I think I did okay, but in an environment where you get those opportunities, and opportunities for leadership outside the classroom. It's just so very student forward and student focused, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. And it's so interesting because I always think about one of the most valuable things that you can have as a college student is the experience of knowing what you don't like. Right? Isn't that
Mhm.
amazing? Right? Those internships and those courses. You're like, you try this, you try that. I don't like this, I don't like that. That gets you to where you want to be, which I think is great. So let's go to Jonathan. You talked about a little bit about before, but
Yeah.
add on. Go ahead. The EdUp Experience has delivered over 1,000 episodes with higher ed leaders from around the world. Now you can support the show for just $5.99 a month and lock in that rate for life when you join before December 31st, 2025. You'll enjoy ad-free early access to episodes. Go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com. Click support the show and secure your lifetime rate today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, for me personally and everything that the academic opportunities, just the ability to take certain classes that I don't know that I would have taken anywhere else, or kind of expanding and pushing, had a kind of a classic liberal arts core curriculum that was required, but also I think in a good way, right? It gave a taste for so many different topics and so many different ways to think and challenging. And that really was just so critical and essential to my entire education. So that ability to kind of to connect with professors and have those conversations and also learn from other students, even though we were kind of, thinking back, we're young, kind of figuring it out, but just learning from each other. And then for me in particular, it was the chance to do things outside of the classrooms. I was able to do a study abroad, and on campus, I was very involved in both, primarily orientation programs, but also student government. And so student government, I think for me was a chance to kind of wrap your head around some issues and kind of working with what are the student concerns and kind of bringing it to the administration, what are administrative concerns, and kind of my first real exposure to negotiations and working with and managing up and leading a team, and so all of those kind of outside in a relatively safe and controlled environment, if you will, that exposure through the student government, I think was something that I think back on often, and even some of those conversations that we would have. So that, again, that outside the classroom experience for me was really really, really critical.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I think you mentioned liberal arts. I feel like they're making a comeback. I mean, they never really left,
Yeah.
but now it's more important than ever because
Yeah.
we don't know what's going to happen in job
Right.
markets. Having all those different skills, right, that you
Yeah.
need to be flexible, to be adaptive, I think it's fantastic. So,
Absolutely.
okay, I appreciate that. So, I want to jump into a little bit more of the details, right? So, let's talk about, we'll start with you, Jonathan. After financial aid and scholarships, right? How else can students afford a private college?
So I think the most important things for families to know, or the most important thing, is to save for college, right? So that's kind of later in the process, but private colleges, as we mentioned earlier, a lot of them have resources to help offset, to discount, right? So you're not paying that sticker price, you're paying the net price. But for many families, there still is going to be a cost associated with it, right? Unfortunately, not all colleges can meet the full financial need of families. And so after kind of grants and scholarships, families hopefully have been preparing and thinking about college for some time. And so saving is really important. And the gold standard with saving really remains 529 plans. There's two basic types, your 529 savings plans and 529 prepaid plans, which private college is a part of. But what these plans allow you to do is to save for educational expenses, higher ed expenses, and others if plans change. But we're talking about higher ed right now. We're talking about private college. But it gives you flexibility, it gives you choice, so that when you get to the point of making that decision, you are saying, all right, we're going to get this much from financial aid, but we can afford this much maybe in paying a little bit. But we know that we have this savings set aside. And so that's, and I know we're not talking about a myth, but one of another big myth that comes when it associated with costs is that it's too late to start saving. And that's really just not the case, right? Any amount that you can save will help in the long run. And even if you're lucky enough to get a lot of financial aid at the undergrad experience, you can use those funds for graduate school, right? Or with 529s, you can give it to another family member. So there's a lot that you can do with those funds. So I think really that's important for families and for them to not feel discouraged if their children are a little bit older and they're like, oh, got it saved when they were young. It's okay. You can save now. Any amount will help because, having worked in financial aid, I think it's a challenging conversation to have at the point of decision making when you're running the numbers and you're trying to make it work and the school's done what it can and you've appealed and the school's done a little bit more, but it's really at that point. So yeah, I think saving ahead of time is something that families can do. Another tactical thing that they can do, and this is kind of really in the weeds, is that if they are making that decision, a lot of schools will offer a payment plan, right? And so this is going to say, all right, you owe us $10,000 over the course of the year, but instead of doing two $5,000 checks, spread it out over 10 or 12 months. So, but yeah, really the savings piece helps give you options when that time comes.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you said start saving no matter what age. I think that's a
Yeah.
big point. It's a really, really good insight, and I appreciate that. Karen, what do you want to say about that?
Yeah, I think that's all really great advice, right? And I think when it comes down to making the decision, I think Jonathan's absolutely right. The planning that you've done and the savings that you've done gives you more options, right? Because when I'm working with families and they're trying to determine which, the student has applied to 8 schools, they've gotten into, let's say, 4 or 5, and they're really comparing financial aid awards, merit awards, they're really trying to make a decision but really trying to balance that decision, right? That the decision certainly can rest on finances, but should not be the sole determiner of which
Yeah.
school. So there's a lot of conversations around this is a really good place for my student, and I'm really hoping that the financial aid will help me sort of get there, right? Because I think it's really trying to balance both. And it's often really good advice as students are building college lists, just as you would build a list that's, if you're applying to a school that has a 5% admit rate, that you probably want to apply to schools that are a little bit easier to get into when you're putting together a list of, say, 8 or 10. And I think it's the same with college lists in terms of finances, right? Because, it is interesting. I think private colleges have more geographic diversity as a whole. I just looked at some stats around retention rates and that private colleges retain at a slightly higher, like it's a 5% differential, I think, retain at a higher rate. So when you think about this is not going to be a 5-year experience. This is going to be a 4-year experience, right? I'm going to be able to get the classes I need for my major. I'm going to be able to get those gen eds finished up, right? I'm going to be able to do what I need to do in that sort of period of time, right? And I think the other piece of that is sometimes students are very attracted by public institutions out of state, but public institutions out of state cost basically what private colleges cost, right? If I were a Coloradan and I wanted to go to UCLA, for example, it's going to cost me about the same it's going to cost to go to Colorado College, right? And so because there's commitments in those states to students, and UCLA might be a bit of an outlier, but it's true in lots of states, right? In that their commitment is to the students who are in their state. They receive some state funding. They might have goals around what percentages of students, and we have a little bit more flexibility on the private side to enroll the students that we think are going to be the best fit, and will feel like they'll get a lot out of the opportunities here.
Yeah, and Karen, something you mentioned that I just thought about was like, what saves money too is graduating on time.
Yes, it does. For sure.
4 years instead of 5 or 6. That helps a lot right there too. That's great. So, all right, let's transition. So, you both know There's currently a lot of changes and challenges arising in higher ed today. So, particularly for private institutions. So, how can institutions and families best navigate these challenges? What do you think, Karen?
Oh, such a good question. And every day I think I open my New York Times app and I see something different. So it's hard for me to predict. I think what's interesting is, at Colorado College and other private colleges I know, the instinct is to, of course, follow the law. That's what we need to do. Our federal funding in terms of, federally based scholarships and loans for our students is critically important to us. And yet I feel like we have a little bit more in the way of autonomy. We will follow the law, but we will also really think carefully about what our institutions need.
Mm,
This is a time where if you know who you are as an institution, you understand your values and your mission, you can live those on a daily basis. React to the things you need to react to. I've probably talked more to legal counsel in the last 5 years than I did in the previous 30, um, because I think there are a lot of challenges. But in so many cases, particularly in my view at private institutions, the goal is to enroll an amazing class of students, right? And I'm getting all of the support that I need from my colleagues across campus to get our team really focused on doing that. So again, when the student experience is front and center, many of us on the private, certainly some private institutions got hit more with kind of federal funding cuts. But I also hear from those places that their commitment again is to students. Many of us on the private side didn't have quite as many federal grants and federal dollars. And so we could kind of recover a little bit more in terms of that. But again, if you have to make changes, it's the first question is how will this impact the student experience? And I'm not so sure that maybe that's a luxury for private institutions to be able to ask that question. But boy, if I were a student or a parent in this situation, those would be the questions that I'd be asking is, if there need to be tough decisions, who makes those decisions and how are they made? Or what's the lens that like, we can't do anything that would affect this? Like, where do we draw the lines? And so I have found those conversations challenging at times, certainly at institutions, because it's just a different world than it was, say, 5 years ago. But also, I know what this place is, and I know that Colorado College will continue to do what it does. And so, again, as someone who'd be looking at possibly spending 4 years there, I would be very heartened by that.
Yeah, good insights. What do you think, Jonathan?
yeah, I think for families right now, and obviously the institutions are, like Karen said, there's a lot that they're considering on a daily basis. And for families, I think something that gets lost sometimes in the admissions process, and and I understand it can be stressful for families, and there's a lot that you're going through and working through, but it's as much of the college kind of choosing you as you choosing the college. And I think sometimes folks forget that, right? And so and I saw this once, I read it. It's really that it's kind of a two-way street on an interview. And while there's certainly some highly selective colleges that really are just choosing you, a vast majority of colleges and private colleges are accepting over 50% of their applicants. And so I think especially during these times, as Karen mentioned, as there's tough decisions on campus being made, families should be asking those questions about what do you see as the future of this institution? Where do you see it going? And paying close attention to what decisions are being made about academic offerings, where the investments are going, kind of the costs associated with the college, and are there any longer term implications because of maybe some external challenges that the colleges are facing. But it is really that two-way street, right? The colleges want you, the student, but you also need to have them. And that gets back to that fit question, right? Because everybody wants a good fit. Students want a good fit because sure, you can transfer, and plenty of students do, but ideally you're on the same. Colleges want because that's good for retention, right? And so everyone wants that fit. And I think for now, it's especially important to this. And then just one more practical thing I would say for families is that concerns about changes or what is happening in higher education, still feel confident about higher education, private higher education, that it will be around. but kind of doubling down on savings, right? That cost, because if there are some financial implications to colleges and cuts do need to be made, then for some, those costs might go back to you. And while that's not an ideal scenario, if you as the family still deem it valuable and it is truly that investment for the future, which so many folks do, and you're willing to pay for it, kind of getting ahead of it and saving now for potentially future expenses that could come as a potential of some of those changes happening at the higher education level.
Yeah, great insights as well. Thank you, Jonathan. So we're coming up on time. I'm going to ask you our last question. So great insights, great conversation. So what's one, maybe two things that you want our listeners to walk away from today to know all about private colleges? So I'm going to start with you, Karen. What do you got? Support the EdUp experience for just $5.99 a month and lock in that rate for life. You'll get ad-free early access to episodes. But hurry. Price goes up after December 31st, 2025. Visit edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and click support the show.
Oh gosh. Such a good question. So one of the things I would say is that I think a college education is a really valuable thing. And I think that sometimes we think about it as what's going to happen right after high school. But I guess I'd want to continue to emphasize with your audience that it's more than about what happens right after high school. It's what happens later. And so I really think that's one of the things that makes a really strong case for a private college education. And the other thing I will say is that I think both saving for college, financial aid, admission can be overly mysterious. And so I think my goal here is to say, ask questions, think through who are the people that can help you understand an institution, understand how to save. And one of the things I love about about College Well, and I'm on the board of directors, is that like this is saving for college at the current rate. So if someone is benchmarking against Colorado College, our fees are probably going to go up. That's just an inevitable part of what's going on in the world, right? And so being able to say, like, I have a stake in my students' education, and I'm holding this sort of tuition credit, this tuition certificate toward their education. I think the other thing is, having watched lots of students and parents in this process, what you're saying to your student is, I think this is really valuable. And this investment in you is really important to me and important to your continued growth as an adult. Because we all know adulting can be hard. And so getting students set up on the right path when they graduate from college is really important. So that's probably 5 things. So sorry about that, Alvin, but hopefully that was helpful.
And this is why it's called EdUp Extra. Thanks, Karen. That's right. That was awesome. All right, Jonathan, go ahead. Rob, close us up.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. My biggest takeaway, I want families to know that private colleges, financially affordable, right? For all of the reasons that we've talked about today, they are affordable. Make sure, obviously, that it's part of that consideration set in your application list, because when you dig into it and when you start to play around and use those different calculators on the site, the net price calculator will help you kind of determine exactly what you will pay, or a projection of what you might pay. It's really, you will see that there is affordable options out there for you. So that is kind of the key takeaway. And like Karen said, if for folks that want to learn more about that process and how it works and some insights from folks, please do, check out the resources on collegewell.com, because those are free resources. It helps provide good information and good insights for folks as they're kind of going through. But financially affordable, doable, part of that decision set, absolutely. And don't eliminate them because of that sticker price, because too many folks look at that big number. They just don't apply without knowing that there are resources available, and it could be, or it is, a missed opportunity.
Good points. Absolutely. Excellent. Great conversation. Thank you both. First, let me intro outro Jonathan Sparling. He's the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at College Well. Jonathan, thank you so very much.
Appreciate it, Elvin. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And let me outro Karen Christoph. She is the Dean of Admission at Colorado College. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Alvin. It's been a lot of fun. I hope it's been helpful to your audience.
Absolutely. Thank you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.